like to welcome you to today's Provost training Dr. Kensmoe. Before we get started, I have a couple favors to ask, and at least one of these will not be a surprise. If you would please make sure that all the phone ringers are turned down, off, whatever it takes to keep those silent. Also, those sitting towards the back of this way will notice there is a video camera recording this for posterity. That camera's pretty sensitive, so we would ask please those that are seated around there to refrain from talking, moving too much, or even clapping when you want to clap. There'll be lots of moments to clap. That camera picks up everything, so we would ask that you please be aware of that. Now to today's speaker. Our presenter, Dr. Jeff Kensmoe, joined the Birmingham Southern faculty in 2010, and he currently serves as an associate professor in the Department of Music here at Birmingham Southern. He received a BM from the University of Wisconsin at Eau Claire, and an MM and a DA from the University of Northern Colorado. His presentation today is entitled, I think you see it there, Schubert and His Progenitors. Please help me welcome to the stage Dr. Jeff Kensmoe.
So thank you for coming. Thank you to the Provost office for giving me this opportunity. Thank you to the Faculty Development Committee for also giving me this opportunity. And thank you to my collaborative artist, Dr. Virginia Dismukes, who is an undergraduate of BSc here, also has a master's from Manhattan University, and a doctorate from the University of Alabama. She teaches both here at BSc and with our conservatory program. So, over this time frame, I dug into a lot of new territory during my sabbatical and discovered quite a few dead ends, some very fascinating characters, and unexpected relationships. A good deal of beautiful music and some average music. There's an abundance of musicians, genres, and societal movements from the 1760s to the 1810s that contribute to the growth and expansion of the genre of the Lied, or rather, German art song. You will hear me use this term quite often today. Lied simply means the singular, and leader means the plural form. So, today I'll walk you through the beginnings of the Lied, some of the genre's major contributors, new genres that were enormously influential upon the Lied's development, and how all these developments influenced one of the most revered German Lied composers, Franz Schubert. The first Berlin Song School. Frederick the Great, the King of Prussia, collected many musicians. He was a music enthusiast, and he played the flute. Throughout his reign, he took his lessons and performed in concerts at the palace. He wanted an opera house in Berlin that would rival the opera house in Dresden. Most notably, he hired Karl Braun and Franz Benda, both of whom go on to be highly respected composers during the era. Johann Quantz, who wrote numerous flute works for Frederick. The theorist Kirnberger, and the highly respected Carl Philipp Emanuel Bach, CPE, son of Johann Sebastian Bach. Christian Kraus, Frederick the Great's lawyer and an amateur composer, arranged for a group of poets to work with some of Frederick the Great's collection of composers to create a new form of song. The group decided upon 6 tenets. Okay, next. 6 tenets and published their first collaborative publication in 1753, Oden mit Melodie. In it, they explained that the melody should be speech-like, clear, and for every voice, easy to sing. The range should be within a tenth, and all difficulties should be avoided. Text expression is more important than any purely musical concern. The music and text should fuse to make a single emotional unit, and the accompanying bass line should be unobtrusive. And above all, the music should clearly project the overall meaning of a text, not just the individual words. Here's a piece written after the 7 Years' War with lyrics by Johann Voss, an influential poet of the area, and was set to music by C.E.E. Bach. It's a drinking song with a call to arms. Published with 18 verses, but today I'll just settle for 3. In einem das Meer ist und sein Schloss und sehr beschauter Tag. Eine feste Burg ist unser Gott und Kloster und Schlacht der Tag. Und Kloster und Schlacht der Tag. Der Engel Gottes steht daher auf Wolken über den Tag. Schaut's vor, in die feine Herr und The Singspiel, the first and most important influence on the genre of the Lied. Singspiel is simply a play with singing, in essence, similar to our idea of musical theater. The English ballade, or English ballad opera, The Devil to Pay, or The Wise Metamorphs, by Charles Coffey, was performed in northern Germany during the mid-1700s and was hugely successful. In 1766, the composer Johann combined with librettist Christian Weisse to create a version of Coffey's Devil to Pay and named it Der Teufel ist los. And it was hugely successful, so much so that Hiller created a sequel. So much for thinking it only occurs today. Hiller became known as the father of Singspiel, composing 12 in all. Hiller used specific musical styles to indicate his characters in Singspiel, similar to the way Shakespeare used rhyme or prose to indicate a character's status. For example, the peasants and common folk sang music in the strophic Lied style, whereas characters who were of nobility and upper class sang music that was similar to the genre of opera. He was also known as a teacher of singing. He wrote treatises on the subject and opened a school to improve the miserable state of German singing. Most notably, he welcomed and encouraged young women into his school. He is credited with the advancement of the art of singing in Germany. Ohne Lieb und ohne Wein is quintessential early Lied, simple yet lusty. This must have been an incredibly popular song. I found it in 4 different publications from the 1770s to the mid-1800s. This particular version that you see is an 1800 Erato publication. You can see that it was translated into English and was sold to consumers in England. Again, this has many, many verses, but I will just be doing one. Ohne Lieb und ohne Wein, was darunter leben? Alles, was uns kann erfreuen, müssen diese geben. Wenn die großen Fische freuen, was ist ihre Freude? Schöne Mädchen, gute Wein, einzig diese beide. Duchess Anna Amalia of Weimar. She was a niece of Frederick the Great. She was married to the Duke of Saxe-Weimar, Ernest Wilhelm Wolff. However, he died shortly after. Anna Amalia was left to raise 2 children and rule the region until her son was old enough to take over. She grew up around music and was taught piano and composition. She is responsible for establishing Weimar's court of muses, sometimes referred to as Weimar classicism. Much in the same way, her uncle, Frederick the Great, collected musicians. Anna Amalia collected great artists and poets, such as Christoph Wieland, Johann Gottfried von Herder, and Johann Wolfgang Goethe. She also convinced such artists as Karl Zeckendorf, composer, and Carola Schröter, a celebrated actress, singer, and composer, to work in Weimar. Goethe worked closely with both Anna Amalia and Carola Schröter, asking each to set Singspiels to music. Das Fischrede was a collaboration between Goethe and Schröter, and she not only composed the music for the Singspiel, but played the lead character of Dortchen. The opening scene of the piece is the very first setting of Goethe's Erlkönig. Here's just a few lines to give you a sense of how Goethe urged Schröter to set the tone. Wer reist so spät durch Bad und Wind, es ließ der Vater mit seinem Kind. Der bat den Knaben ohne den Mann, erfassen sicher erhält ihn wahr. Mein Sohn, was freust du so an dein Gesicht? Siehst Vater, du den Erben nicht, den Erdenkönig mit Kron und Streif. Mein Sohn, es ist ein Nebelstreif. And the piece continues on in that exact manner. So again, it is the simple strophic melody that is being set here in this part of the show. Good. The next piece, composed in 1776, is an excerpt from Anna Amalia's setting of Goethe's Singspiel, Erwin und Elmire. In this scene, the first character, Erwin, laments about his life. So it's set in C minor. His friend Bernardo gently chastises him, telling him that hard work provides for you and that God will help you find a wife and a friend like him. Now, set in the relative C major. This is a very simple modulation and uncommon leader during the era. However, this type of musical tool will be used quite often in the future of Lied. So there were many influences upon this genre. During the era, we see a rise and expansion of the middle class. Simply, more people had more time, they wanted entertainment. Cristofori's invention of the pianoforte, an instrument allowed for greater dynamic contrasts and expression. One could also make an argument for Johann Friedrich's influential book on the origin of language. The idea of Volkslieder and Volksstimmigkeit, common people songs and folk qualities, was an important concept in intellectual circles. In his book, Herder argued the importance of each language as a treasury to world culture and that no language can be held inferior. Ballades from the British Isles and the new Romantic poetry provided opportunities for composers to express musically an array of complex emotions. The late 18th century poetry of Tieck, Gellert, Klopstock, Weisser, Hölty, Hiller, Schiller, and Goethe helped provide these opportunities. There was an explosion of music publications and periodicals. Lieder collections were being published as early as the 1720s. However, these early collections, pre-Berlin Song School, were often parodies of other composers' music, such as Handel, Lully, and Couperin, with lyrics added on top of the tune. So, there was rarely a connection between tune and lyric. Between 1736 and 1799, 780 collections were published. And from 1800 to 1826, these collections were being published at a rate of 100 per month. Also, the operatic Scena, simply a dramatic episode for solo voice and accompaniment, which could be piano or orchestra. Written much in the same vein as an opera with a recitative and aria. Recitative means, in essence, is an in-tone speech. And then, melodrama. Yes, and then melodrama was a genre that was hugely popular in both France and Germany. And no, we're not talking about the mustached villains and damsels in distress, but rather, in its literal Greek meaning, a combination of music and acting. The episodes alternate between sections of music followed by speech, and sections of music that underscore the speaking actor or actors. It was an opportunity to write freely, disregarding form and format. It was a way to describe musically persons, places, things, and emotions. The sky was the limit. It gave composers permission to be as imaginative as they possibly could. For those of you who are in media and film studies, simply think film score. Same idea and concepts. For decades, it was a highly successful art form, and composers worked in the genre. For example, Georg Benda, who was a member of the first Berlin Song School, Johann Rudolf Zumsteeg, Beethoven, Carl Maria von Weber, Robert Schumann, Franz Liszt, and even Schubert tried his hand at it. And yes, I thought about performing it, but I couldn't. For today's listeners, it would just come off as a little bit too hokey for me. Sorry, Schubert. In 1778, Mozart saw George Benda's melodrama Medea. This was what he wrote to his father. Nothing has ever surprised me so much. It is not sung, but only declaimed, and the music is like an obligato recitative. Occasionally, there's also speech underneath the music, which makes a marvelous effect. Do you know what I think? One ought to treat operatic recitative in this way, and only have sung recitative when the words can be well expressed by the music. Mozart loved Benda's melodramas so much that he carried them around with him and planned to write one himself. But that idea never came to fruition. Instead, he included the concept in two different places in his unfinished Singspiel. As I was researching this genre, I remembered that I had one time actually performed in a melodrama myself. So in 1991, I was working with the Eric Hawkins Dance Company in New York City. During that year, I premiered Alan Hovanes's Killer of Enemies at the Joyce Theater, and then we also toured around the United States. Still to this day, you can view clips of our performance on the Kentucky PBS website. And also, there's probably one very famous melodrama that everybody probably remembers. Anybody got a venture of a guess that we all probably heard the music to and know the piece? Yeah, Peter and the Wolf, right? Yeah, that's a very famous melodrama. So it's still around. It's still around. There are two more composers that need to be mentioned as well. The first is an important transitionary figure from the first to the second Berlin Song School. Johann André. He was the music director of the German Theater in Berlin, a music publisher, and composed around 30 operas as well as Balladen in theater. Most importantly, in 1774, he set the ballade Lenore 32 strokes in a through-composed manner, meaning no strophic material. All 32 verses had different music. The second, Philipp Christoph Kaiser, he was a pianist, composer, orchestral musician, music educator, and poet. Goethe had great respect for Kaiser's compositional skills. He was so enthusiastic over his leader that he sent one of his Singspiels to him to be set to music. However, Kaiser worked so slowly that eventually Goethe gave up on getting anything out of it. Jäger's Nachtlied is based on Goethe's poem of the same name. However, this version of the poem has been modified, most likely by Kaiser. I chose this piece for two reasons. First, it's a beautiful, knockdown, gorgeous piece. And second, it contains an unexpected modulation from E minor to C major, then back to E minor. Lovely, simple, and descriptive of the text. The hunter's out hunting in E minor, and when he sees his former love hovering as a spirit in the field, he transitions to C major. Then, when she does not see him, Kaiser returns to E minor. For a lieder written in 1777, this is rare. Not uncommon in Singspiel, but uncommon in lieder.
Im Felde schleich ich still und wild, lausch mit dem Feuer. Da schwebt so licht ein liebes Bild, dein süßes Bild mir vor. Du wandelst jetzt wohl still und wild, durch Feld und Übertal. Und ach, mein schnell berauschend Bild, sterb sich mir's nicht einmal.
The second Berlin Song School. Most of these composers have a loose connection to the first Berlin Song School and operated under similar tenets. There were three main players in this school. Johann Adam Peter Schulz, J.A.P. Schulz, who in 1790 published his Lieder im Volkston, a large collection of lieder. These settings are often referred to as the gold standard of the genre. Karl Friedrich von Zelter was a very close friend of Goethe, and in fact there are publications of Goethe's and Zelter's correspondence over the years. It's a fascinating glimpse into their friendship and the era. Zelter was a well-known music critic, composer, and conductor. The following piece I would like to excerpt for you is based on a Schiller poem. Though published in 1826, we discovered in Zelter's letters to Goethe that he was actually working on the set of songs in 1803 for his arrival in Weimar. Die Sänger der Vorwelt has an extended introduction, almost a third of the piece. It depicts the stately walk of the singers of old, followed by extended improvisational-like passages, very much like a Bach cantata, as if they were being played on a minstrel's harp. And if they were being, when the singer enters, the piano accompaniment then rolls out one long held chord after another. The combination harkens the listener to a past era, musically depicting a minstrel singing an ode while strumming his lyre. The piece represents an enormous step away from the norms of the common strophic lead. And for time's sake, I just like, because it begins with Ginger playing this opening part, I just want to play this little bit of an opening, since it's really fascinating. Including the head music director of the Prussian court. He is a prolific composer. He wrote opera, Singspiel, Liederspiel, an invention of his own that did not blossom, and composed approximately 1,500 lieder. After the invasion of Napoleon, his family became destitute. He traveled to Vienna in 1809 and wrote and published Goethe's Lieder Oden mit Balladen und Romanzen while he was there. These lieder became very popular in Vienna. The next thing I would like to highlight for you is Aus Euphrosyne, published in 1809. It is a portion of Goethe's larger poem, Euphrosyne. Goethe wrote the work on the death of a famous actress in Weimar.
Left in der
Johann Rudolf Zumsteeg wrote opera, melodrama, Singspiel, and composed nearly 400 lieder. Out of all the lead composers who came before Schubert admired Zumsteeg's lieder the most. So much so that he modeled several of his own pieces on Zumsteeg's work. He didn't copy them whole cloth, but rather Schubert used his forms, keys, and structural concepts as guides. He did this with other composers as well, namely Recital. In the spring of 1811, Schubert's schoolmate Joseph Spaun wrote of Schubert's fascination with Zumsteeg's songs, saying, "After some days I went to see him in the music room where he was given an hour for practice. He had several of Zumsteeg's songs in front of him and told me that these songs moved him profoundly. 'Listen,' he said once, 'to the song I have here,' and with a voice already half breaking, he sang Kolba. And he showed me Erwartung, Ritter's Togenburg, etc. He said he could revel in these songs for days on end." Of Zumsteeg's 400 lead compositions, there are several that are extremely large in scope. For instance, Des Vaters Tochter von Taubenheim and Die Entführung are 21 minutes and 24 minutes in length, respectively. They are filled with elements that resemble melodrama, the operatic scena, and as well as sections of stroke lieder. Some of Zumsteeg's most popular lieder were published between 1800 and 1805. He referred to these balladen as kleine balladen, small ballads, obviously a reference to the size of his other works. I'll be performing one of the 6-minute-long short ballads on Sunday afternoon, Richard und Mathilde, a sad tale of unrequited love where not just one, but two people die in the same song. There's one direct contemporary of Schubert that I would like to mention, Karl Löwe. He was born 2 months before Franz Schubert in 1796. He was a conductor, an accomplished singer, and composer, and composed approximately 400 lieder. Later in the 19th century, he was referred to as the Schubert of North Germany. His opus number 1, Edvard, is his first published work. It's an example of a typical English ballad, dramatic and grisly. His harmonic palette is rich. He includes a recitative passage and uses different rhythm and pitch centers to indicate characters, quite typical of the era. I had a problem with this music, getting the translation in. And so the whole thing in this situation is the mother keeps asking, for example, why is your sword red with blood? And he says, well, I killed my vulture, my hawk. And then she says, so why is the blood of that on your sword is not the same color as of that hawk? He says, well, I killed my horse. She says, but your horse was old and it didn't matter. Well, then I killed my father, is what he says. So he goes on. So what are you going to do now? She keeps asking him what's going to happen next. And at the very end, you're going to hear, she says, what are you going to do with me then, now that this is all done? What are you going to do with me? And he says, there's a special place for you, because you're the one who suggested I do it.
Dein Schwert ist von Blut zu Rot, Edward, dein Schwert ist von Blut zu Rot, mein Tod traurig war, oh. Ich habe geschlagen meinen Leibe tot, ich habe geschlagen meinen Leibe tot, und das geht mir nach. Deines kleines Blut ist nicht so rot, die Erden lehn. Ich seh sie nimmer mehr. Das sage mir, oh, oh, der
Now, it's at this point I discovered something a little unusual. On the right, you see Schubert's Eine Artische Ballade and Löwe's Edvard, which I just worked with there, as on the left. Don't they look a bit similar? Ginger, can you play just a few bars of the Schubert for me? Interesting, isn't it? It's a different title, yet the same text as Löwe's Edvard. Could it have been modeled on Löwe's Edvard? Well, when we look at the dates, we see Löwe's work is published in 1880, and Schubert's Altschottische was composed in 1827, nearly a decade later, and published many years after his death. A decade after some of Schubert's most inspired and dramatic works, which are full of the current compositional techniques. Yet Schubert reverts back to an old style of the First Berlin Song School, a straightforward strophic song, but with a much richer harmonic pattern. Why? Well, here is a review from the 1824 Allgemeine Musikalische Zeitung out of Leipzig, saying, Herr Franz Schubert does not write actual songs and has no desire to do so, but rather free vocal works, many so free that one might perhaps call them caprices or fantasies. With this purpose in mind, the poems, mostly new, but of greatly varying quality, are well chosen and the translations to music generally praiseworthy. The composer succeeds almost throughout in arranging the whole and each detail in accordance with the poet's idea. He is, however, much less successful in the execution, which tries to compensate for the lack of inner unity, order, and regularity by eccentricities, barely or not at all motivated by often rather wild goings on. With these qualities, i.e. unity, order, and regularity, admittedly, no artist's work can become a beautiful work of art. Without them, however, certainly only bizarre, grotesque things will result. And the writer continues, Schubert's strange tendency to modulate repeatedly within the compass of the song is deplorable. In 1826, a letter to Schubert from the Artadia publishing firm shows that his music was widely perceived as eccentric and inaccessible. The reviewer goes on to state, I must frankly confess to you that the peculiar, often ingenious, but occasionally also rather strange procedures of your mind's creations are not yet sufficiently and generally understood by our poet. Simply stated, Schubert brought nothing new to the genre of the lute. However, he did desire to improve upon what came before him. Next is Schubert's dramatic ballade, Der Taucher. It's a poem by Schiller expressing the dangers of wanting to know more than we need to know. Now, listen, I'm going to give just a snippet here of it, just a few small bits, because it is a very, very long piece. It's 25 minutes long. Listen to the following signs and signifiers Schubert uses. At the beginning, he announces the king. You'll hear that in the dotted rhythms. You'll hear a tumbling chalice. A vocal line also has the falling chalice once again. The boiling, turbulent water. The Charybdian whirlpool. For music theory students, can you catch the fully diminished chord in third inversion as the king mentions diving into the depths? And finally, all who are unwilling to dive into the depths look down and away from the king. Schubert's compositional process was extremely unusual for the Recital. He worked two different versions of it at the same time. He began the first version September 17, 1813, and he was almost 16 years old at the time, and finished April 15, 1814, 7 months to complete. His second version also began in September of 1813, was completed in August of 1814, 11 months. Then he amended this second version at the beginning of 1815. So he worked on this piece for 16 to 17 months, fine-tuning the music descriptions of drama and narrative. And these are not the only ones, by the way. He has several of these, and in fact, about half of them were not finished, ever finished, but giant pieces. I would like to end today's forum with one of Schubert's most famous works, Der Erlkönig. Here he used the same compositional techniques others have been using during his lifetime. The techniques adhere closely to the narrative and the drama. However, Schubert's work is superbly crafted. You will hear 4 characters: the narrator, the father, the son, and the Erlkönig. There is a 5th character, if you want to call it the horse. You'll hear her in the Swiss triplet figures in that hands. Each character has musical indications that help define who they are. The father sings in a low tessitura. The child sings higher and minor. The Erlkönig sings in a major, which is very creepy. And you'll hear that Erlkönig's accompaniment pattern is uniquely different. It's not on the horse. Until his last line where he grabs the child, then you'll hear that he's on the horse. Also a sidebar. I will not perform this piece on Sunday, but rather I will be singing Löwe's Erlkönig. It's a fascinating contrast in compositional choices. However, the thought process with each composer is quite similar. As does Schubert, Schubert musically sets each character differently. The father, again, is set in a low tessitura. The child has a high tessitura. And the Erlkönig sings over a different texture. Here, Löwe uses a tremolo, which is in major, the same as Schubert. But what is uniquely different is when the Erlkönig sings, the tempo slows. And a musical sign that indicates a spirit without shape or form. Again, like Schubert, cool yet creepy. They are both fascinating settings, and honestly, I'm not sure which one I like better. A final point. Schubert wrote his setting in 1850, the same year he completed Der Taufe. However, he didn't publish it until 1821. This is important. Not until Schubert's Erlkönig was published would anyone have had the opportunity to hear it outside of the Viennese salon settings. Löwe published his Erlkönig in his first opus with Edvard in 1818. Neither had heard of the other's work, yet we see similar compositional thought processes going on here. There are clear connections in this genre from the late 1700s to the early 1800s and into Schubert. The leap's progression into Schubert's is linear. There are no monumental leaps away from his progenitors. However, Schubert strove to improve the genre. He was musically progressive. He was aggressive with his compositional thought process. He was aggressive with harmonies, his modulations, his musical characterizations and meanings. And for this, he was little understood during the era. However, only a few short years later, when the Romantic era finally caught up with Schubert, was he understood for the great leap composer he truly was. Thank you again for coming today. And my final piece, Der König of
Does anyone have questions about? You ready? I'm sure you'll think of some and follow him afterwards with those pressing questions. Thank you all again for coming. Another round of applause. Dr. Kensmoe.